Unlike most reserves up north here, we don't bury our dead when they pass on. In a way, we kind of do, but we do it differently. About 2 miles away from where my reserve is, there is a patch of water that is said to go down so deep that it almost has no end. The water is nearly black, so you can't see no further than 2 feet down and has no filtering from where it is to the river. That is where we take our dead. We don't really see it as a sad thing when we hold these burials, but we consider it an honor to be going there when we pass on. For years, generations, we've always wrapped our dead in elk or moose fur and slowly slide the body in the water to sink down to our elders. Weighed down with some stones, of course, so the body could just slowly sink while we play our hand drums and feast around the edges of the water. Some of the local kids like to go down there and have fires during the night to tell stories to the buried or just plain scary stories to be spooked. I've done it myself, and there would be times when we'd hear voices coming over the water. Some nights, people claim that they hear the throat music and drums coming from the river's direction after the night of a burial. The elders say it's the spirits of past accepting the new. I've heard them myself, and it's not at all scary, but accepting and a comfort. Sometimes even seeing the spirits of elders walk along the road beating a hand drum. This would scare anyone, but where I am, it's considered a gift from the dead, like the dead bless us for protection. Once a month, a good burning offering is made to the water grave. No one knows exactly how many bodies are down there, but it has to be hundreds, thousands dating back for so long. One day I'll go there myself and will consider it an honor. One day I will see how far down it goes. One day, but not today. A light outside the window. I know this sounds totally insane, but I swear something is off with my new neighbor. I am honestly feeling so on edge every single night, like I cannot even sleep or think straight. I figured maybe sharing it here might help, because I need someone to tell me I'm not losing it, or at least give me some idea of what I should do next. I know this might be long, but please bear with me. I have lived in this same old house for years, and yeah, it has its creaks and weird sounds, but I have never felt like this before, not even when I had that creepy landlord a few years back. That guy was weird, always watching from his window at odd hours. This new neighbor is different, and I mean that in the worst possible way. For the past 2 weeks, I have noticed that no matter what time I wake up at night, there is a faint light behind my curtains, shining at a low angle like it is coming from a flashlight or maybe a phone. The first night, I assumed it was nothing, maybe a passing car or a cat. Then it happened again and again. Now I'm sure that someone, I'm almost certain it's my neighbor, is actually standing outside my window in the middle of the night, never making a sound, just standing there. I tried to catch them, but any time I rush to the window or fling open the blinds, there is just darkness. Let me tell you, that kind of silent persistence really does something to your head. You know, makes you question every thought you have. I started staying awake longer, pretending to sleep, but with one eye half open, waiting for that faint glow. Sure enough, it is always there. When I try to tell my friends, they say I am paranoid, stressed out from work, that I need a break. How can I take a break when I have this feeling that I am being watched, like studied, like maybe someone is waiting for me to slip up or drop my guard? It is not just the light either. During the day, I have caught him staring at me from behind his curtains next door, just standing still. He never waves, never looks away like a normal person would when caught, just stares like I am some sort of animal he is analyzing. If that does not scream messed up, I do not know what does. I would call the cops, but what would I say? That I think my neighbor watches me at night because I see a weird light outside my window, that during the day he stares at me through his curtains? I have no proof. I worry that if I confront him, it might escalate, like maybe he has been trying to work up the nerve to do something worse. I am just here waiting, feeling that clock tick in my skull. It has gotten to the point that when the sun goes down, I start shaking a little, and I lie in bed watching the walls, the door, the window, imagining that faint glow coming closer, maybe pressing against the glass. Maybe one night I will wake and he will be inside, standing in the corner of my bedroom, silent and still. I do not want to live like this, but I am too scared to do anything, too scared to even tell my family. They would just say I am too old to be afraid of the dark, that I am letting my imagination go wild. Maybe I am. Maybe it is all in my head, but I can feel it. I can feel those eyes on me. I wonder how long he will wait before making a move, how long until something finally gives, because I cannot see a way out. I cannot rest. I cannot bring myself to just pull the trigger and call the cops. I am stuck in a messed up state right now, waiting every night for that light to appear. It always does. I have no clue how the hell this will ever end. The visitor at the back door 4. Did you ever have a memory that seemed to change over time? By that I mean, is there a moment in your life that you vividly recall, yet something about it always felt a little off? Scientifically, this is usually referred to as a repressed memory. Over time, these memories occasionally begin to shift and change, the true details becoming clearer as time goes by. This phenomenon is usually what is called memory reconstruction. This occurs when a person has seen or experienced a traumatic event, something that leaves a mental scar to some degree. Repressing these memories, it is the brain's way of protecting us from the pain or the fear of reliving those moments. It is quite remarkable, the human mind's ability to recognize and act on this seemingly autonomously. I bring this up because this happened to me very recently. There is quite a distant memory which had lived in my mind for many, many years. For all this time, it seemed to me to be quite a mundane and insignificant memory, so I was always confused as to why it continued to rise to the surface of my consciousness, seemingly at random times, always catching me off guard. I guess I need to take you back to set the scene. I was young, and I mean really young. We're talking 1995 or thereabouts. I would have been maybe 5 or 6 years old at this time. We lived in a small, quaint little home about 20 minutes drive outside of a minor city in southeast Queensland, Australia. Our home sat on 10 acres of land, and beyond that, bushland as far as the eye could see. It was your typical 90s home. Picture a linoleum kitchen floor in that weird greenish tint with the diamond patterns on it, vertical wood paneling up the walls, an obnoxiously loud wall clock sitting front and center in the kitchen, a beige carpeted living area with 2 mismatched couches and a tiny box television in the corner. Like I said, quaint. This particular day was like any other. It was summer and very hot, obviously. My parents were both at work, and my brother was down the back paddock mowing. I recall vividly sitting in our living room playing with my Hot Wheels cars as bad midday television blared out from the set behind me. Yeah, very stereotypical 90s kid, I know. But I mention this only to paint the picture that I do distinctly remember everything about this day. Or, I thought I did anyway. This is where the tale takes a strange turn. See, for the longest time, I remember looking up from my toys and seeing my father standing there at the back door. It was one of those screen doors that many homes back then had, the ones with the metal frame and a square sheet of insect screen in the center. So I could see him there on the other side, looking in at me. For many, many years, I remembered my father staring down at me and asking to come inside, for me to get up and unlock the door so he could do so. But, for some strange reason I simply could not recall until now, I did not want to open that door to let him in. For all this time, I put this down to the idea that I was just being a typical cheeky little kid, refusing to let my dad come in the door. Memories are fickle things, aren't they? As I got older, the more that memory surfaced, the more I began to question this series of events. The more I questioned things, the more the fog began to lift, the more the memory began to shift and change. Now, I remember that day in crystal clarity. What I saw when I looked up at that door was not my father at all. I sat there, my little Hot Wheels car in hand, watching as this dark, oddly shaped thing stared in at me. I noticed it was slightly swaying, as if being gently swished back and forth by the light breeze that day. I remembered everything in that single moment. Oh God, it was awful. That's why I didn't want to open the door. It's not because I was trying to have fun with my father. I just didn't want this thing to come in. Perhaps what I remember most clearly was the sheer silence of those long few minutes. I recall the rustling of the wind through the mulberry bushes outside, I recall the rhythmic ticking of the clock, and another sound, not something I had ever heard before or ever have again. It was a voice, along with that damned awful clock hammering away at my brain. A deep gurgling voice very clearly spoke to me. Tick, tock. Shall I come in? Shall I? Tick, tock. Might you be unlocking the door? Tick, tock. It's a little warm in here. The breeze might cool things down. Tick, tock. Your parents will be home soon. They might get mad if you don't open the door to let the dog out. Tick, tock. And so it went on and on. For many, many long minutes, it stood there speaking to me, staring in at me on the floor. This awful thing, it wasn't directly telling me to let it inside as such. It was for some reason trying to manipulate me into it being my choice to let it in. For all those hours I sat there, truly frozen in fear, unable to move. I do not believe that there was some otherworldly supernatural force preventing me from moving. I simply could not draw myself away from that spot. I could not summon the physical strength needed to force my legs to do their job, nor did I have the mental capacity to do so. You may ask, of course, how can I be sure this actually happened? If memories truly are these fluid, interchangeable constructs that can simply rearrange themselves at will, how can I know for sure if the events of this day really happened the way I have just described them? All I can tell you is that it is a palpable difference. Where before this memory existed as something of a picture book which would flash before my mind's eye occasionally, the details I recall now are something I can feel with every fiber of my being. I remember this as vividly as I can recall events from 2 days ago. That is all I can offer. In my heart, I know it to be true. We have strange ghost stories in Australia. Growing up, I would hear all manner of tales about bush spirits wandering the vast expanse of the outback, causing mischief and mayhem upon anyone who might happen across their path. On the other end of the spectrum, we also have our stories of malicious beings, things that are tied to this world and remain here for the sole purpose of causing pain and suffering. I wish this memory had stayed repressed. I dare not guess as to which type of entity I encountered that day, so long ago. A little house. There was a house in the rural backwater neighborhood that my little cousin lived in, which stood out as bizarre compared to the rest. It was like the peaceful little shire that the tiny halflings lived in, a farming fishing town with gentle and friendly residents who discouraged any ruckus or disturbance of the peace. This house was unlike the other houses which were warm, inviting, and often lit either with meager electricity or with fire and lamp, and often had the residents sitting outside greeting people or even inviting them inside. But this house was different. There was no light inside, no windows apart from a small one with the curtains drawn, no fire or lamp inside, judging from the smokeless chimney, and no hospitable host. Instead, the owner was an old man. An old man, African American, either in his late 40s or early 50s, who wore a gray trench coat which concealed a magnum firearm which he almost never seemed to use. The old one wore a top hat and a badge which indicated he was part of some sort of elite military mercenary group, alongside a handful of rewards. He also had a shockingly strong physique for his age, though this was secondary to the real mystery. He was clearly loaded, judging from his clothes and social status, but he still owned this little dingy, run-down, and unnerving house. Why? Every night, the old codger would walk out of his expensive car, having driven an hour or so from his more pleasant abode in the next town, and begin his routine of standing guard near the door. Sometimes he would walk around. Sometimes he would start whistling the Pledge of Allegiance to himself in a tone and facial expression which did not seem remotely happy or patriotic. My cousin couldn't tell, so at one point he asked a question to the old man. "Why do you guard this place so fiercely? What is inside that house?" In response, the old man soldier looked at my cousin with fire in his eyes, as though he had been told a racial slur. "There is nothing inside that house." The old man did not shout. He simply said that angrily with a firm tone that conveyed deep seriousness. My cousin had been up to some trouble and ended up robbing a jewelry store 1 hour and 45 minutes away from the town he lived in. Thinking that the dingy house would be a good place to hide the gems and such, while the heat died down, My cousin went to the house with a large backpack stuffed with goodies. He slowly climbed up the tall iron fence with a sign warning that intruders would be harshly prosecuted. My cousin slowly trotted up the gravel path leading to the house uphill and put his feet in front of the door. He slowly reached out and put a hand on the brass door handle. He slowly pulled the bar to the side and did not hear the footsteps behind him, which now were breaking into a sprint. My cousin froze. Inside that house was nothing. Close your eyes for a moment. That is the only thing he saw that was past the doorframe. Suddenly, he felt a hand grab him by the arm and throw him to the side, knocking my cousin into the dirt. The old man immediately slammed the door shut, but little noise was made as the door had nothing to slam against. Slowly, the old thing turned around and looked the young man in the eyes and said, "There is nothing inside that house." I found a hidden door in my basement. I wish I had never opened it. I've lived in my house for 5 years. It's an old place built in the early 1900s with all the charm and creaks you'd expect from a century-old home. The basement has always freaked me out a bit. It's cold, damp, and smells faintly of mildew. But I'd never paid it much attention beyond the occasional trip to store boxes or grab tools. Until last week, I was moving some old furniture when I noticed a draft. At first, I thought it was just the basement being drafty as usual, but then I realized it was coming from behind one of the shelves. The air was colder, almost icy. Curious, I pulled the shelf away from the wall, and that's when I saw it, a small wooden door, barely taller than a crawlspace hatch, covered in peeling paint. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't on the house inspection report when I bought the place, and I had never noticed it before. It had no handle, just a keyhole. I should have stopped there. I should have walked away, but I didn't. Instead, I grabbed my toolbox, picked the lock, thank you YouTube tutorials, and swung the door open. Behind it was a narrow stone staircase spiraling down into darkness. The air that rushed out smelled wrong, damp, metallic, and faintly sweet like rotting fruit. Against every ounce of better judgment, I grabbed a flashlight and started descending. The steps felt endless. The farther I went, the more the walls seemed to close in. When I finally reached the bottom, I found myself in a small, circular chamber made of smooth stone. In the center was a well. It looked ancient, the edges worn smooth as if by centuries of use. Here's where it gets weird. As I shined my flashlight around, I noticed something scratched into the walls. Words. Over and over, the same phrase, "Do not look down." I backed away from the well, heart pounding. But then I heard it, a soft, wet sound, like something shifting in the water. My flashlight flickered, and in the brief darkness, I swear I heard a whisper, faint, like it was coming from miles below. "Help me." I should have run. I should have bolted back up the stairs and sealed the door forever. But something about that voice, it didn't sound threatening. It sounded desperate. Against my better judgment, I leaned over the well and aimed my flashlight down. The beam barely reached the water. It was black and still, reflecting nothing. But as I stared, the surface began to ripple. Slowly, something started to rise. At first, I thought it was a person, a head, pale and smooth, breaking the surface. Then I saw the eyes, round, lidless, and too large for its face. Its mouth was wide, filled with needle-like teeth, and it was smiling. The whisper came again, louder this time, "Help me." I don't remember running back up the stairs. I don't remember sealing the door or pushing the shelf back in place. But I must have, because when I came to, I was sitting on my kitchen floor, shaking, the basement door locked tight. Since then, I've heard noises at night. Soft scratching, like something trying to find its way out. Last night, I found muddy footprints leading from the basement door to my bed. I haven't been back down there. I don't think I ever will. But the scratches are getting louder, and I can't help but notice they're starting to sound like words. Help me. Thanks for venturing into the shadows with us on Nightmare Narratives. If this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the so you never miss another terrifying tale. Have a scary story of your own? Share it in the comments. We'd love to hear it. Who knows? Your nightmare might be our next feature. Sleep tight if you dare.